It was just another quiet day at the small, dimly lit animal shelter on the outskirts of town. Dogs barked occasionally, their lonely voices echoing through the cold metal cages. Some wagged their tails in hope. Others curled up in the corners, waiting for a miracle. The staff at the shelter loved the animals, but they knew it was hard to find them homes. People rarely came by, and when they did, they often chose the puppies or the more energetic dogs. Few even noticed the older, quieter ones. But today, something unusual was happening. The shelter manager, Carla, had received a call in the morning that left her speechless. It was from someone she never expected to hear from, Keanu Reeves, the Hollywood actor known for his kindness and humility. He had asked if he could visit the shelter. Carla didn't believe it at first. Was this a prank? She had no idea why someone like him would come to such a small, unnoticed place. But within an hour, a sleek black car pulled up in front of the shelter. Keanu Reeves stepped out, dressed in simple jeans and a t-shirt. No cameras, no entourage, just him. Carla was still in shock when he walked in. "Hi, I'm Keanu. I heard you have some dogs here that could use some company." His voice was calm, and he had a warm smile on his face. Carla didn't know what to say. She had expected a superstar, but here was a man who seemed more interested in the dogs than anything else. Word spread fast among the staff. Everyone was curious about what brought him here. Keanu was known for his quiet generosity, but why this shelter? And what did he want to do with the dogs? Keanu looked around the shelter, his eyes scanning the rows of cages. He walked slowly, stopping occasionally to look at a dog. Some barked excitedly, some wagged their tails, and some simply looked at him with tired, hopeful eyes. Then he stopped in front of a cage where a small, scruffy dog lay curled up in the corner. The dog didn't move, didn't bark, and didn't even wag its tail. This was Hector, a quiet, old dog who had been at the shelter for far too long. He wasn't young, he wasn't energetic, and he wasn't the kind of dog people usually adopted. But for some reason, Keanu's eyes softened when he saw him. "What's his story?" he asked Carla, his voice quiet but filled with curiosity. Carla sighed as she approached Hector's cage. "Hector's been here for a long time. He's a good dog, but no one really notices him. He's older, and people usually go for the younger ones. He doesn't have much energy left, and he just spends most of his time lying there waiting. We've tried everything to find him a home, but it's been hard." Keanu crouched down, his face close to the cage bars. He didn't say anything for a moment, just looked at Hector with understanding eyes. "Hey, buddy," he whispered softly. "How's it going?" To everyone's surprise, Hector slowly lifted his head and looked at Keanu. His eyes, which had once been full of life, now held a quiet sadness. Keanu could feel it. He knew that feeling of being overlooked, of being alone. He had gone through his own struggles in life, and something about Hector spoke to him on a deep level. Keanu turned to Carla and said, "Can I take him out for a bit? I'd like to spend some time with him." Carla nodded, still trying to wrap her head around the fact that Keanu Reeves was standing in her shelter, asking to spend time with an old dog no one wanted. As Carla opened the cage, Hector slowly got to his feet. He wasn't excited or energetic, just slow and careful. Keanu reached out his hand, and after a moment, Hector cautiously sniffed it. Then, to everyone's surprise, he leaned his head into Keanu's hand, as if he had been waiting for this moment his whole life. Keanu smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile. He gently stroked Hector's fur, and for the first time in a long while, the old dog wagged his tail, just a little, but it was enough. The staff watched in amazement as Keanu spent the next few hours with Hector. They walked around the small yard outside, Keanu talking to him quietly, as if they were old friends catching up. Hector stayed close to him, his head low, but there was a sense of peace between them. As the afternoon went on, it became clear that something was happening. Keanu wasn't just spending time with a dog. He was connecting with a soul that had been forgotten by the world. And Hector, in his quiet way, was beginning to trust again. Keanu decided to take Hector for a walk beyond the shelter yard. Carla handed him a leash, but as Keanu clipped it on, he noticed something. Hector didn't resist. Most dogs would be excited, pulling at the leash, eager to explore. But not Hector. He walked slowly beside Keanu, his old legs carrying him with caution, as if he had learned not to expect too much from life. They walked through the nearby park, where the autumn leaves crunched under their feet. Keanu held the leash gently, giving Hector the space to explore if he wanted. But Hector stayed close, his head low, occasionally sniffing the air. He wasn't used to this kind of freedom, and it showed. His steps were hesitant, unsure of what to expect. As they walked, Keanu talked softly to him. "You've been through a lot, haven't you, buddy? It's tough, feeling like you don't belong anywhere. But you're not alone anymore. I'm here with you." The park was quiet, with only a few people passing by. Some recognized Keanu but respected his space, while others were more focused on the old dog by his side. There was something almost poetic about the two of them. One, a famous actor who had seen the highs and lows of life, and the other an old, forgotten dog who had almost given up on finding a home. As they reached a bench, Keanu sat down, and Hector curled up beside him. Keanu stroked his fur gently, feeling the rough texture of the dog's coat. Hector's eyes slowly closed, and for the first time in a long while, he seemed to relax completely. The connection between them was undeniable. Keanu had come to the shelter without any expectations. But now, sitting on that bench with Hector beside him, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. And Hector, for the first time in years, he felt safe. As the sun began to set, the once bright sky turned shades of orange and pink. The cool breeze rustled the leaves around them, but Keanu didn't want the moment to end. He looked down at Hector, who had now fallen into a peaceful sleep beside him on the bench. His old body was still, his breathing steady, and for the first time since coming to the shelter, Hector looked completely content. Keanu gently placed his hand on Hector's head, feeling a deep sense of calm wash over him. He had come here just to visit the shelter, maybe spend a little time with the dogs, but something about Hector had changed everything. There was a connection here that he hadn't expected. It was as if their fates had crossed paths at the perfect moment, both of them searching for something they couldn't quite put into words. Time seemed to stand still as Keanu sat there, thinking. He had a busy life, a life filled with movie sets, interviews, travel, and countless responsibilities. Taking on a dog, especially one as old as Hector, wasn't part of the plan. He had never considered it before. But now, sitting there with Hector beside him, something deep inside Keanu was pulling him in a new direction. Carla, who had been watching from a distance, slowly walked over to check on them. She didn't want to interrupt, but she couldn't help but notice how peaceful they both looked. "How's it going?" she asked softly, trying not to wake Hector. Keanu looked up, his expression thoughtful. "He's a good dog. I think he just needed someone to see him, you know." Carla nodded, her heart warming at the sight of Hector finally finding some comfort. "Yeah, he's been waiting for a long time." Keanu hesitated for a moment, then said something that took Carla by surprise. "I don't think I can leave him here." Carla blinked, unsure if she had heard him right. "You mean?" Keanu smiled softly. "I think he's coming home with me." For a moment, Carla couldn't believe it. Keanu Reeves, a Hollywood star, was adopting one of the oldest, least noticed dogs in the shelter. She had seen people come and go, choosing the younger, more playful dogs. But here was someone who had chosen Hector, a dog who had almost given up hope. "Are you sure?" Carla asked gently. "Hector's a bit older, and he's had some health issues. It won't be easy." Keanu nodded, understanding what she was saying. "I know, but I think we both need each other." The paperwork was simple enough, but the decision felt monumental. Keanu had officially adopted Hector, and the old dog now had a home, a real home. As they drove away from the shelter, Hector sat in the back seat, his eyes wide, watching the world outside the car window. It was as if he couldn't quite believe it. For years, he had lived in a small cage, waiting, hoping, and then slowly accepting that maybe his time had passed. But now, everything had changed. Keanu glanced at Hector in the rearview mirror, a small smile playing on his lips. "How are you doing back there, buddy?" Hector's ears twitched at the sound of Keanu's voice, and though he didn't wag his tail or bark, there was a quiet contentment in his eyes. He wasn't the kind of dog who showed excitement easily, but Keanu could sense the change in him. The old dog was beginning to realize that he was safe, that someone cared. The drive home was quiet, with the city lights glowing softly in the distance. Keanu lived in a comfortable, modest house, nothing too extravagant, but it was warm and inviting. When they arrived, Keanu opened the car door and gently helped Hector out. The old dog's legs were stiff from the ride, but he took slow, careful steps beside Keanu as they walked toward the front door. Keanu unlocked the door and stepped inside, letting Hector explore at his own pace. The house was calm, with soft lighting and cozy furniture. Hector sniffed the air, his nose twitching as he took in the unfamiliar smells. He walked slowly, his tail hanging low, but there was a quiet curiosity in the way he moved. He wasn't sure what to make of this new place, but it felt different from anywhere he had been before. Keanu knelt down beside him, gently scratching behind Hector's ears. "This is your home now, okay? Take your time. You're safe here." Hector looked up at Keanu, his tired eyes full of unspoken gratitude. He had spent so long waiting for this, waiting for someone to see him, to care about him. And now, in this quiet, peaceful home, it was finally happening. Keanu set out a comfortable dog bed in the corner of the living room, along with a bowl of water and some food. But Hector didn't seem interested in the bed just yet. Instead, he walked over to the couch, where Keanu had taken a seat, and gently rested his head on Keanu's knee. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. This wasn't just about finding a place to sleep, it was about finding a place to belong. Keanu smiled, his hand resting on Hector's head. "Looks like we're going to be good friends, huh?" The days that followed were quiet but meaningful. Keanu and Hector settled into a routine, one that seemed to suit them both perfectly. Every morning, Keanu would take Hector for a slow walk around the neighborhood. The old dog didn't have the energy to run or chase after things, but he seemed to enjoy the fresh air and the calm pace of their walks. Keanu noticed how Hector's steps grew a little steadier with each passing day. The old dog wasn't quite as hesitant as he had been before. There was a new sense of confidence in the way he moved, as if he was finally starting to believe that this was his life now, that he had a home and someone who cared about him. At night, Hector would curl up in his dog bed, but more often than not, he would wander over to where Keanu was sitting and rest his head on Keanu's lap. There was a quiet bond forming between them, something that didn't need words to be understood. They were two souls who had found each other at just the right time. Keanu had always been a private person, someone who valued his solitude. But with Hector around, the house didn't feel empty anymore. There was a warmth in the simple act of caring for the old dog, a sense of purpose that Keanu hadn't expected to find. As the days turned into weeks, Keanu noticed something else. Hector was starting to wag his tail. It was a small, subtle movement, but it was there. Whenever Keanu came home from a long day of work, Hector would greet him at the door, his tail wagging slowly, his eyes bright with recognition. It was as if he had finally realized that this was his forever home. And for Keanu, those small moments meant everything. He had spent his life giving to others, but now, with Hector, he had found something different. It wasn't about grand gestures or big acts of kindness. It was about the quiet, everyday moments that made life meaningful. As the months passed, Hector's health slowly improved. He still had his old dog moments, where his legs would stiffen and his energy would wane, but overall, he was happier and healthier than he had been in years. The shelter had been a place of waiting, of uncertainty, but now he had found stability, love, and most importantly, a family. Keanu had made adjustments to his life to accommodate Hector's needs. He made sure he was home as much as possible, even rearranging his work schedule when he could. It wasn't always easy, But for Keanu, it was worth it. He had found something special in Hector, a quiet companionship that filled a space in his heart he hadn't realized was empty. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Hector resting his head on Keanu's lap as usual, Keanu looked down at the dog who had changed his life in so many unexpected ways. "You know, buddy," he said softly, "I think we saved each other." Hector's eyes closed, his breathing slow and steady. He didn't need to respond. Keanu knew the truth. They had both been through their share of struggles. Both had been searching for something they didn't even realize they needed. And now, they had found it. Their journey together wasn't one of dramatic, life-changing events. It was about the small, everyday moments, the walks, the quiet evenings, the simple act of being there for each other. And in those moments, both Keanu and Hector had found something they had been missing all along. It wasn't just a new beginning for Hector. It was a new beginning for Keanu, too. As the sun set outside, casting a warm glow over the room, Keanu stroked Hector's fur gently, a sense of peace settling over him. In this quiet, simple life, they had both found what they had been looking for. And in that moment, everything felt right. The bond between Keanu and Hector continued to grow stronger with each passing day. They settled into a routine that brought both of them joy and comfort. Every morning, Keanu would wake up early, brew a cup of coffee, and sit outside on the porch while Hector stretched his old legs, enjoying the crisp morning air. The neighborhood had become a familiar place to Hector, and although he was no longer as energetic as he had once been, there was a quiet dignity in the way he moved, as if he had come to terms with a new chapter of his life. Keanu, too, found peace in the simplicity of their routine. His life, which had once been filled with the chaos of movie sets, interviews, and red carpet events, now had a new rhythm. It wasn't that he had given up his career or his public life. He was still very much in demand in Hollywood, but there was a new balance. Having Hector by his side grounded him in a way he hadn't anticipated. One afternoon, as they sat together on the porch, Keanu received a phone call from his agent. There was a new film project in the works, something big, another action movie, the kind Keanu was known for. It was an exciting opportunity, one that would take him away for several months of filming in various locations around the world. As his agent talked, listing off the details and expectations, Keanu found himself glancing down at Hector, who was resting peacefully beside him, unaware of the conversation. For the first time in a long time, Keanu hesitated. The film sounded incredible, and his agent was clearly excited about it. But Keanu couldn't help but think about Hector and what it would mean for him to be left behind. The thought of leaving the old dog in someone else's care, especially after all they had been through, didn't sit right with him. Keanu cleared his throat, interrupting his agent mid-sentence. "I'm going to have to think about it," he said. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Think about it? Keanu, this is a huge opportunity. It's perfect for you." "I know," Keanu replied, his voice calm but firm. "But I need some time to decide." After hanging up, Keanu leaned back in his chair, staring out at the horizon. The old Keanu would have jumped at the opportunity without a second thought. But now, things were different. His priorities had shifted, and Hector was a big part of that change. Days passed, and the decision weighed heavily on Keanu's mind. He loved acting. It was a part of who he was, but the thought of leaving Hector behind, even for a few months, was hard to shake. He knew that Hector didn't have much time left. The dog had already lived a long life, and Keanu didn't want to miss any of the time they had left together. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, Keanu received another call from his agent, checking in to see if he had made a decision. Keanu sighed, running his hand through his hair as he glanced at Hector, who was dozing peacefully beside him. "I've thought about it," Keanu said, his voice steady, "and I've made my decision." His agent waited, clearly anxious to hear what Keanu would say. "I'm not taking the role," Keanu continued, surprising even himself at the firmness of his words. There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line. "You're not taking it?" "No," Keanu replied. "I've got something more important to take care of right now." His agent tried to argue, to persuade him to reconsider, but Keanu was resolute. This wasn't just about a film or a career decision. This was about something much deeper, something that couldn't be measured in terms of fame or success. After the call ended, Keanu sat in the quiet of his living room, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. He had made the right choice. Hector stirred beside him, as if sensing the weight of the decision, and rested his head on Keanu's lap. "Looks like we're in this together, buddy," Keanu said softly, stroking Hector's fur. It wasn't the first time Keanu had turned down a role for personal reasons, but this felt different. This was about more than just taking time for himself. It was about honoring the bond he had formed with Hector. The old dog had come into his life at a time when he needed it most, and Keanu wasn't going to abandon him now. As the months passed, Hector's health began to decline. It was a slow, gradual process, and Keanu could see the signs. Hector's once steady gait became more wobbly, and he started sleeping more, his body growing weaker with each passing day. Keanu knew that the time was coming, but he wasn't ready to say goodbye. He wasn't sure if he ever would be. Despite Hector's declining health, their bond only grew stronger. Keanu made sure that every day was special for Hector, whether it was a quiet walk around the neighborhood or just sitting together on the porch, enjoying the simple pleasures of life. There was something beautiful in the quiet moments they shared, something that Keanu had never found in the hustle and bustle of his busy career. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset, Keanu felt a deep sense of gratitude. Hector had changed his life in so many ways he hadn't expected. He had taught Keanu about love, loyalty, and the importance of being present in the moment. And in return, Keanu had given Hector the gift of a peaceful, loving home in his final days. Hector passed away quietly one night, curled up in his dog bed beside Keanu's bed. It was a peaceful end to a long, full life. Keanu was heartbroken, but he knew that Hector had lived his final days in peace, surrounded by love. In the days that followed, Keanu felt a deep emptiness in the house without Hector's presence. The old dog had become such a central part of his life that it was hard to imagine the days without him. But as Keanu looked back on their time together, he felt a sense of peace. They had found each other when they needed it most, and that was something that would stay with Keanu forever. Hector may have been just a sheltered dog, forgotten by the world, but to Keanu, he had been so much more. He had been a companion, a friend, and a reminder of the simple joys that life had to offer. Keanu continued on with his life, returning to his work and his busy schedule, but he never forgot the lessons Hector had taught him. In the quiet moments, when the world slowed down, Keanu would think of Hector and smile, grateful for the time they had shared and the bond that had changed both of their lives forever. And in the end, that was all that mattered.